This will be a day long remembered. Now I am the master.
Welcome to another episode of Legends and Theories, and as you have noticed, I've been streaming Arkham Knight recently, and although I haven't completed the game for the channel yet, by the time of recording this, I believe I'm going to be streaming my last section of the campaign tonight, but I've already beat the game before, and know how it ends. I'm guessing that last streams will take like another 2 to 3 hours, but I have an interesting theory. Most of the game I've streamed so far didn't happen. In fact, the only part of the game that I played that could be real ends at about the hour 28-minute mark of my first video. And you might think this is crazy, but one of the things that got me to start thinking like this is when I watched the Gaming Sins video on Batman Arkham Knight, where it was remarked that why would Scarecrow create a neutralizing agent to his toxin and ace chemicals, and that always bugged me. I started to think of it and came to a realization that everything past the ace chemicals mission, at least at the moment before you see Joker, which is about an hour and 28 minutes into that first stream. It's a little bit past that, but I'm just going to say that to be clear and kind of just close enough that everything after that could not happen. And looking at multiple things, including the plot, some plot holes, weird inconsistencies, and using some straight up math, we'll be able to figure it out. And as they would say on any of those theory channels from MatPat, this is just a theory, but one that seems extremely likely. Looking at the plot, there was one thing that's not exactly a plot hole. It just seems almost impossible when you think of it, that every ally of Batman is put in some type of danger within the period of one night, with most of them being kidnapped and a few turning on them, and a few even possibly dying, with one confirmed dead and one likely dead. Looking at this, I could name off all these people: Commissioner Gordon, Robin, Nightwing, Lucius Fox, Catwoman, and Oracle were all kidnapped within one night, and that's extremely unlikely, with Gordon, Robin, and Oracle all being kidnapped by Scarecrow, and then Catwoman is being kidnapped by Riddler, Nightwing by Penguin, and Lucius Fox by Hush. And that's not even the craziest part, because with the exception of Gordon and Catwoman, and really kind of Oracle since she's in the wheelchair, the rest of them have elite training by Batman and the best gadgets possible. And even crazier, Jason Todd has turned out to be alive and on the other side, trying to take down Batman, is the Arkham Knight. Also, looking at it, Gordon turns on him, and Poison Ivy, who is an ally of Batman, dies to save Gotham, and at the end, in the Nightfall Protocol, Bruce and possibly Alfred also die, but there's a chance they may be alive, and their deaths were faked. But since we can't really confirm that, we're not going to. We're going to act like they did die. That seems so weird that something bad has happened with every ally Batman has had within one night. And sure, it could be a story thing, but it just seems like too much of a coincidence. And there's another thing that bugs me. How does Jason know that Barbara is Oracle? When you play the game initially, you think, oh, yeah, Barbara had to be paralyzed before. Jason was kidnapped and thought dead by the hand of the Joker. But if you look at it and play the Batgirl Matter of Family DLC, Barbara is working with Tim Drake, the third Robin, who only comes in after everything happens with Jason. So Jason would not be able to know that Barbara Gordon is Oracle simply because of that. And even if he was able to figure it out, it just seems like another coincidence. And with all those coincidences I just mentioned earlier, with all the kidnappings and stuff, it just feels like there's a lot of holes in this, and way too many coincidences happening within one night. And another thing is, I'm guessing that Barbara has moved into the clock tower as her base recently, because back in Arkham City, when Batman's talking about how there's a supply of Titan in Arkham City, and Penguin has it, Barbara comes in, cutting off Alfred, sounding surprised, and I always assumed that she was in the Batcave at that point. Perhaps the clock tower is being renovated, but I'm guessing that she worked out of the Batcave at least the time Jason was there, and Jason would have to go through a lot of hoops to be able to figure out where Barbara will be working out of now. So either way, this also feels kind of odd, but I'm going to continue on, because that's all just story stuff that doesn't really make sense, but it all feeds into my theory, and that is that Scarecrow's fear gas would make this happen. But why would they all survive? And why would Batman be able to win in this fear gas? But I do have an answer to that, and my theory is that this fear gas is different and has a special effect. It takes away hope, gives it back, and then pulls the hope away again. Because later in the game, and even though if that didn't happen, it could be intentional of the developers to have it in, Scarecrow says he realized that fear is the absence of hope, and I think that's what this fear gas is doing, giving Batman hope and then tearing it away. Also, when thinking of it, thinking of Adrian when Batman has a negative response to it, and Batman's about to stop Scarecrow at Ace Chemicals, he learns that Oracle is about to be kidnapped, and with that part, I'm thinking that it could either be, the very impossible thing with the Arkham Knight knowing, as Jason, that she's Oracle and everything else, which could be explained, or it could be the fear gas starting to begin to work on Batman. And another thing that was always odd is when he puts in the third neutralizing agent. Here's the blast radius has been increased by 1000%, which could either be done by the fear gas, or that wasn't a neutralizing agent at all. I think that it might be more fear gas, and Batman was unknowingly helping Scarecrow. But I'll be looking at all those ramifications in a moment. I'd like to continue going over this part of the theory for now. And then, Batman is also attacked by the Joker, and it's revealed that he was not cured of Joker's poisoning before he took the cure, and it took hold before that. And that made almost no sense, since technically Batman was the only person who got the cure, because that cure could not have been made any more of, and it was never really explained. That's a pretty big plot hole. If you think of it, Batman never mentions the Joker's poisoned blood, just that Tim is working on something important, and we don't really know what that is. Possibly Batman could have Tim, who is the smartest of the Robins, already set up to be working on a counter to Crane's fear toxin, or something else completely different, and that this was just what Batman's mind came up with to reveal why he was going into one of his worst fears, becoming the Joker, which I'm going to mention again in a minute, but let's continue on with these inconsistencies. When Batman is again about to capture Scarecrow, Gordon turns on him, and Gordon is captured, although he does learn that Oracle is alive. And if we keep going and look at it more, the inconsistencies just keep getting crazier and crazier to think about how it's so many times he wins, he fails. The only way to beat Scarecrow is to reveal his identity, which is another fear of his, and his final fear of failing is shown with Nightfall Protocol. After he saved Gotham, he is still killed off, and we're just going to assume that he is killed off, and kind of ignore that last scene. To possibly say that could be what really happened, that Batman could have gone fully into the fear gas. I believe he is an agent of fear now, fully, and given up by Bruce Wayne. Or we could just say that that is a possible ending that he imagines that he could have survived, giving him more hope into it to be torn away later. But I'm going to go back to that one point earlier with Joker. It was revealed in Dark Knight's Metal that one of Batman's greatest fears is to become the Joker, which is proven by one of DC's coolest characters that's been recently created, the Batman Who Laughs, which is from the Dark Multiverse, where the people there are born out of the fears of the normal versions of the heroes in our universe. And that one was born out of Batman's greatest, or one of the greatest fears, of him becoming the Joker, which is exactly what happens when this Batman kills the Joker and eventually becomes him. And this Joker, Batman, goes to terrorize the multiverse for multiple big events. But it's not really important because although this is a different Batman, we would assume he has similar fears to that Batman, who is the mainline Batman. So that's a logical conclusion you can make. But you may be saying, this is a plot. What about inconsistencies like actual plot holes? And what about that math stuff you're mentioning? I'm going to go over some inconsistencies I noticed first, and then I'll go towards the more math stuff. So, there are a few things that I always felt odd. If you use Hush side mission, the receptionist disappears, even though she was on the other side of the door when you went in. And maybe she went down the elevator, but she permanently disappears after that. And then there's one part that never made sense to me. The double Scarecrow part. Since you weren't sprayed by fear gas, really since leaving the other airship, and even if the little got in from the stag part, it feels really weird that two Scarecrows would appear, and you couldn't go into detective mode or anything, which is really odd. And finally, when Batman learns Henry is infected by the Joker virus, when you go to the cell, you are able to be released by Joker, who was a hallucination. See the Jason Todd flashback to how he dies, and you're returned to before that moment. And there's almost no logical way to explain that, unless this is all hallucination. But I feel like I'm going to go into the math stuff now, and this is going to be very interesting, and will almost prove that, almost certainly, that there was no way that Batman could have been able to disable that fear gas bomb and Ace chemicals with a small enough blast radius to only affect the chemical plant. So we first understand where Gotham is, and it is in New Jersey. And if you look at this map of the DC superhero cities, I marked up kind of with an orange dot. That's a little hard to see, but it's right above Metropolis. Where the Superman logo is. That's all zoomed in at the bottom, but I need to be showing it on the map, and that is where the blast radius is going to begin from, and it has to, as Kirkler said, cover the entire East Coast, which would mean, assuming it is just America, I'll show other possibilities if it means all of North America, but I'm sure that he only means the country of America, since we typically say North America and not all of America when referring to America. So, looking at it, I'm going to show you how much of that blast radius would cover at a full blast right now. And this is what it looks like. Half of the country, which is more than the eastern coast. So if by eastern coast he meant all of the eastern half of the United States, then yes, Kirkler was right. Because he is covering nearly every state here, and has a vast majority of them, since there are a lot of smaller states on the eastern side, and most of the bigger ones are on the west. So really, he probably has over half of the United States here, definitely. And most of the states are fully covered, with only a few of them being partially covered. And when I say partially covered, they're almost fully covered, with only maybe a fourth to two-thirds at the most not covered. And the best one is one at the bottom. Sorry, I'm not really good at geography, but this blast would be taking out nearly every superhero, and really the only ones are very limited. As you can see, so many of these superheroes focused in one area. But if you'd like to see what this looks like, since it is going into Canada, I'll show you this over our normal world map. It might be a little slightly off, since I do have to kind of figure out exactly where Gotham is there, and it's not going to be perfect. But let's go look at that map of just the continent of North America, and you can see that it's even more. It is so crazy that there's so much of this land covered, with a good portion of Canada being covered by it, although it's not the full extent of it, since more of Canada is to the west, and this blast is crazy big. I'm starting to go off of this map and maybe getting close towards Europe, but I'm not really sure. But there's a way crazier one to think of, which I will be showing you now. This is if you are assuming that it said entire coast, east coast of North America, and that is one of the worst blasts you could see, since the only safe place in the US would be the northwest of Alaska, and you are really not safe almost anywhere. Most of Greenland is covered, and majority of Europe, and part of Africa is. And I was going back to the original one, that, very nice estimate. It does seem almost impossible for people of Gotham to be able to escape the blast radius, since They were ferried out over a period of 24 hours, and it usually does take a while to get across the country. I would say that some of the people did manage to escape if they decided to go really far out, but if most of them decided to even just leave the state of New Jersey and go to one of the surrounding states, they would definitely have been hidden. But if someone left almost immediately in a car, although we were shown that a lot of people have been taken out by bus, and those people who were pulled out about an hour before the events of the game almost certainly did not make it out of that blast radius, since this probably takes place in about an hour or two into the story, since this all takes place within one night. And those people who left exactly when Scarecrow's threat began, and didn't get anything, as long as they just drove straight west, they probably would have made it out of that blast radius. But most others who probably went a state or two over, at the most, maybe they were also just outside of the city. Maybe not exactly outside, but maybe they were in Metropolis, which is pretty close, although it is technically a state over, or somewhere else. They were still in danger. But I can really say, if this was reduced to 25% capacity, then surely that would have been better. And yeah, I kind of agree with you. If it was, it would be, a little better, but not too much better, because let's put this circle down to 25% capacity of the size I have it right now, and you'll see how it's still pretty bad. Here's everything that's covered when I cut down to only 25% of that original blast radius. And you think that, yeah, this looks way better. But I did make a list of these states, looking at a map that is in this one that has the names on them. This is again back in geography. And I'll tell you, all the states that are fully covered of beer gas include Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and Washington, D.C., which is the capital of the nation. They'll all be fully covered in beer gas. And then about half of New York, Pennsylvania, and Virginia would be covered. And New York City should be included in that blast radius. And a small amount of West Virginia, Vermont, and New Hampshire will be covered. And that final blast. Oh, and North Carolina, sorry, I missed a part on the list. So, that is 18 different states and the nation's capital. And sure, that's better than half the US, over half the US, but this is still close to half of the states, since they're all in this small area, and although they're not all fully covered, a good portion of them mainly are, with those last few I said being the smallest ones. And even if we estimate those down, put some of them together, and say maybe 14, 15 states, we'll go with 15. Let's think, that is still 15 states, and the nation's capital, where the president and all the leaders are, and the only person we know that is definitely safe from that blast. But we're not even sure if they are definitely safe, is possibly Superman. We do know exists in this universe by multiple mentions of him in Arkham Knight, and him being in Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, this trailer. So, we know that he's the only one who may be safe, and reasonably assume that, from this blast. And there are so many people being affected by this blast. That's crazy. But there's one last one I want to go through. One last possibility. Let's say that this isn't at the full capacity, and that it is at the lowest estimate you hear when completing the mission. Once you hear about 2 minutes in, which is that the blast radius is at about 23 miles. So we're going to take a look at that and see if the area of Gotham you are in is still safe, and figure out how much of it would be covered. So, if we try to figure out what a fourth of 23 miles is, we learn that it's about 5.75 miles, and you could say 6, and that really wouldn't matter when you see, so we'll just say 6 miles, and you'll realize why it doesn't really matter. I also say 5.8 since I mainly rounded up to the tenths place when I did this, since I had to convert from meters to miles, which I just did on an online calculator I looked up on Google. So let's go and look at this. So we know that we're about only 25 miles away from the blast zone of ace chemicals, since I calculated that, and up to the farthest point up here on Miyagani Island. We learned that I am about 1.5 miles away, and that makes it 1.75 miles away, with that extra 0.25 miles added on, and that is nowhere close, and that is the farthest point away from the center. So going out 6 miles, we already know for certain that so much of this area is going to be covered. But if you don't really believe me, let's keep going. We'll take a look at the other points that are about the farthest away from ace chemicals on the rest of the island. Looking at the farthest point away on Bleak Island, all the way at the end, which is definitely the shortest distance. It's about a mile away from where I am, and that means it's about 1.25 miles away from where I am, where the blast started. So that is certainly going to be covered. There's no doubt about that. And since that is really the shortest, and you may still not believe me while looking at this, you may be thinking, oh no, if we go to the final point on Founders Island, maybe they'll be out. But no, that's not what's going to happen. If we go to what's about the farthest on Founders is, and that's all the way in the train yard, and if we look at it, we learn that it is only 1.2 miles away, so that's about 1.45 miles, and from that, looking at all this, we can know for certain that the blast radius of ace chemicals is going to be covering not only all of the Gotham that we're in, which is what the Cloudburst was able to do, it's going to be going past, it's going to be going into Arkham City, likely Arkham Asylum, heading towards Wayne Manor, and towards any other parts of Gotham, and possibly even touching the shores of Metropolis, if that's one of the ones that we could see. But we know now certainly if they are going by the lowest estimate for a blast radius, then we have to say without any doubt that Gotham is certainly going to be covered in fear gas, and since it's all going to be covered in pure guess, that makes it almost certainly possible, and I feel like likely, that Batman has been hallucinating everything past that 60% mark. And if you're really wondering if I'm right or wrong, that's really up to you, since this is just a theory that I have, but one that makes a lot of logical sense. And when you look at this game, there is almost no possible way, since of all the evidence I provided, of so many inconsistencies, plot holes, some logical problems I noticed, and at our best estimate, only half of the city is definitely being covered that we're in, but almost certainly the maps from all the previous games should also be covered. Maybe not all of the Origins map, but I feel like a good amount of Arkham City, if not all of it, since this is the biggest map, and those maps are maybe at the most a mile away from here, and since only a mile, around 2 miles at the most has been covered, and the last videos were saying is a little less than 6. Those are certainly going to be covered, and what I think of it being almost impossible is almost certainly true. Now that's a pretty long video. We're at almost 32 minutes now, and I'm kind of redoing this editing so it could be a little quicker since it was originally like 35 minutes. And really have to say, this theory was an interesting one I wanted to make, and something I was bugged with, and just wanted to get out there. So I do hope you enjoyed it, and I do hope you enjoyed the videos from earlier this week, including the MODOK review that came out on Tuesday, my Loki review, since I haven't technically watched it yet by the point of recording it, but by the time you've seen this video, I have seen the Loki episode. The recording's on Monday, but the Loki episode comes out on Wednesday. Since it hasn't been Wednesday yet, I haven't seen that episode yet, but yeah, you get it. And I'm probably going to get my Arrowverse one coming out maybe a little earlier than Loki. I might record some of it on Tuesday before I see the end, or maybe record right now. It really depends, since I have seen the Batwoman and Legends episodes already, and since there's no Black Lightning, I don't have to really do that. And I'll just record the Superman and Lois and Flash episodes tomorrow. Or not tomorrow, well, Wednesday or Tuesday night. One or the other. It would work. And then check out my Arkham Knight playthroughs, since I will be, at this point from now, I'll be continuing on with side missions. I should be finishing the campaign on Monday night of the day I'm recording. And really, that's really it. I'm excited, and I'll see you in the next episode of Legends and Theories. I'll also look out for my LEGO review later this week. Almost forgot about that. Yeah, so there'll be something from Tuesday to Saturday. I'll go over that again. It's the MODOK review, followed by Loki and Arrowverse recaps and reviews. And then I'll be going over this theory today. Tomorrow will be Duel on Mustafar, I believe. No, the Duel on Bespin set, the exclusive one. That's really hard to find now. The day after that will be the Bad Batch review, and we'll be resetting again next week. But I'm not really sure what videos I'll make next week, but I'll figure that out. I probably know by this point. Maybe I'll know by Thursday to Saturday. I'll know definitely by the time all these videos are released. I'll almost certainly know by Saturday. Thank you for watching this episode of Legends and Theories. Please like the video, leave some comments, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. And may the Force be with you.